Hi everyone, this is Sarah Kaki and Jeanette Soltis with the Atlanta Divorce Law Group. Today we are discussing high conflict divorces, and they truly come from high conflict people usually. As you all know, our mission is happily ever after divorce, and it comes from a belief and philosophy that divorce does not need to be an ugly, painful process. It could really be a celebration for moving forward. However, as much as we like to hold on to that philosophy in as many cases as we possibly can and make it as amicable as possible so that a dysfunctional family can still remain a family just under a different framework, there are situations where the opposing party, the spouse that you are divorcing from, has such a high conflict personality that we really have to step in and become more aggressive and to protect our clients' future and financial security and the children involved and the interests of our client. And those are what we call the more high conflict divorces that really stem from high conflict opposing parties. So Jeanette, what are the personalities that we see there typically?
So we see this all the time, and it's especially problematic in cases with kids.
Yes.
Because it's just easier to divorce a high conflict personality if there aren't kids involved, but the kids just give a constant reason for there to be this continued battle between the parties. And a lot of times high conflict personalities very often are narcissists or borderline personality or have a personality disorder. Not all high conflict personalities necessarily have a personality disorder, but a lot of times they have many of the traits that you'll read about when it comes to personality disorders.
So we very commonly hear the narcissist one, and we see it very commonly. I mean, neither you or I are psychologists, but we've seen it enough that what are some of the common personality traits we're seeing with the narcissist spouses?
Well, so with a typical high conflict person, I'm just going to kind of lump it all into the high conflict personality. Very much a need to control, and this is why it comes up so much with kids. The need to control the kids when they're with the other parent. And a need, depending on the type of personality disorder, a lot of times a need for, they need love and validation from the kids, so they're very threatened by the kids spending time with the other parent. Or they see things, it's called splitting with a borderline personality. They either see someone, they see things very black and white, and someone is either an angel or the devil. There's no in between. There's no shades of gray. So often during divorce or after divorce, suddenly they view the other party as just this horrible person, and they imagine that all of these terrible things are happening. But kind of the bottom line is these are the people who will call and text repeatedly. Basically, they're surrounded by drama.
And they feed off of it.
Yes, it's just drama is a constant in their life. Often their work lives are surrounded by drama, their personal relationships, there's lots of drama, but also their co-parenting relationship, there's just a lot of drama. And if there's no reason for there to be conflict, they create the conflict. These are people who will, text 50 times over and over, who will show up at your doorstep during your parenting time demanding certain things, a lot of it ends up escalating to accusations of abuse. And that's unfortunately very common, and we see it all the time.
Because these personality types, they have a very strong need to be the victim.
And also a need to control.
And they use the children too to get the attention of who they believe is their perpetrator.
And something that's very tough in these cases, your attorney needs to be aggressive and stand up for you, but something that's really tough is coming to accept the fact that the legal process cannot change the way that person behaves. They are always going to be high conflict. They are always going to be surrounded by drama. They are always going to see the world differently than we do, and nothing that any attorney or therapist or judge does is going to change that fact. So really, you're in a situation where we have to educate the client on how to move forward and co-parent in this situation. Mm-hmm. And then in court, really the best we can do is come up with a parenting plan that provides buffers for the kids to try to insulate the kids.
Boundaries.
Exactly. That insulates the kids from the conflict. And that is like the key word, boundaries, boundaries, boundaries. Mm-hmm. There's a book called Boundaries, and it is sort of the classic book for people who have trouble with boundaries. And in a relationship where there's been narcissistic abuse or just a high conflict personality, very often the other person doesn't have boundaries. They don't know how to create boundaries, and that's a skill that they really need to learn. So there's this book called Boundaries that's very good. Therapy can be very helpful. Something that is so hard for a person who is divorcing or going through a modification with one of these high conflict personality is they're typically a very nice person and they feel mean by putting these boundaries in place. And it is so hard. These are, if you're divorcing a high conflict personality, you have to use a therapist. Right. And this is one of those situations where, a lot of people don't like the idea of therapy, but in my opinion, it is absolutely essential to work with a therapist so you understand that having boundaries does not mean that you're being a jerk, and it does not mean that you're not being compassionate. It is what you have to do to stay insulated from the drama and to insulate your children from the drama.
Mm-hmm. And stop the enabling.
Yes.
Because you're feeding this personality disorder every time you're engaging with them.
And something that I recently learned, and this is from talking with a therapist who works in a lot of custody cases, is there's very much a pattern with many high conflict people as far as certain times of year it escalates, mm-hmm. and then other times of year it gets more quiet. And it depends on the person as far as their certain triggers and
so it can be seasonal.
Yes, it can be seasonal. And she actually recommends that the client who's not high conflict sort of track these, and you can even create like a chart or a calendar to show the pattern. It's something you have to be so careful about, and I see this all the time. When the high conflict personality cools down, a lot of people let their guard down in that period. And have you seen Jurassic Park? Okay, so this is what I regularly describe this as. Remember the Velociraptor testing the electric fence?
Yes, that's what that is. They're testing the boundaries again.
Okay, so a high conflict personality, they're the Velociraptor. They look super cute and sweet, and they're just putting their nose up against that fence. No, they're smart and they're cunning. They're manipulative, and they are searching for the weak spot, and when they find it, they are going to attack.
Wow.
And that's really the situation. And it's a very emotional thing to go through, and it's a very emotional thing to see someone else go through, because there are just these ups and downs and drama. And the only way to not have those ups and downs, and the only way to not just feel pounced on when you let your guard down, is to have consistent boundaries. And toxic people, high conflict people, when you've been married to them, they know you and know how to push your buttons. They know how to manipulate you and how to make you start feeling guilty and how to start playing the victim.
Right.
And it's just a situation where you have to go to therapy. You have to read. There's some really good books. Bill Eddy is an author who has written a number of books. He's a lawyer and a therapist, and he started what is called the High Conflict Institute. And he's written a book called Splitting, Don't Alienate the Kids. I think there's another that's specific to high conflict divorce.
Can you spell his name for anybody?
I believe it's Eddy.
Okay.
Bill Eddy. So he's written some fantastic books. There's another book by a different author called Divorce Poison.
Oh.
That's a really good one to read. There's another one called Stop Walking on Eggshells. That's another fantastic book to read. And anyone going through this, I just encourage them to educate themselves as much as they can, to learn how to manage going forward with co-parenting, or sometimes you can't co-parent. Sometimes the only option is to parallel parent.
Right.
Which means to end up with a parenting plan that limits the communication. And when the kids are with the other parent, the thing that sucks and is just really hard is that with parallel parenting, it means that when the kids are with the other parent, you're also limited.
Yeah.
To have those boundaries and say, you know what, they can't call 50 times over a weekend when the kids are with me, and they can't show up during my parenting time, and they can't schedule things during my time. Having those boundaries also means
you can't do it either.
Yes, that you, and even if you wouldn't call 50 times, if you call once, in their perception, it's going to be, I can call too.
Oh,
and
yeah,
they don't
they're
see
drama heavy. They're looking for that.
Exactly. So it really does mean that you have your life with your kids, and then you have your time without your kids. It's the other parent's time. And you each make decisions about the kids when they're with you, and when they're not with you, they're with the other parent. And interestingly, because kind of the old school thought was, if you have a high conflict situation like this, there needs to be a primary parent and limited time with the other parent. Recent research is showing that that's not the case. What really messes kids up is the conflict. But if you're able to reduce that conflict by basically a parallel parenting plan where there's just not the need to communicate, kids do okay and actually can thrive with a very equal shared parenting, even with high conflict cases.
And even with their structure looking one way at mom's house versus another way in dad's house, because I mean we're both parents and we're both moms, and we have a tendency to think, the way I do it should be, mirrored completely by the father. We should be a team. We should always be doing the things the same way. And as ideal as that is, that may not be reality after divorce. And specifically in the parallel parenting, you are not going to be able to control when your child takes a bath, when your child goes to sleep, what their diaper looks like when they show up to daycare every time. And those are parts of the realities that you have to kind of let go of in order to let go of the ongoing drama.
Yeah, and what research is showing is that it's the conflict that screws up the kids. The conflict and exposure to the conflict. So it is worse for your child to argue over bath time and bedtime and dirty diapers than it is for them to go to bed a little later over at their parents' house or to skip a bath. And that's a very hard reality to accept, but it's just what the research is showing us. That conflict screws up the kids.
Right.
So if you can just disengage from the other parent and accept the lack of control, then in that creates an atmosphere where there's not this conflict the kids are exposed to, the kids are going to be okay.
And that's very important for anybody that's watching this to keep in mind, is that for the most part, when you're seeking an attorney to go through any kind of family law matter, you really want somebody that is willing to help you continue to be a family. And like we said, that does not necessarily look at this as we got to go in and, it's a zero-sum game, win, 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 and take everything. But in a situation when you're dealing with a narcissist, a personality disorder, or somebody that's a high conflict drama, you do need an attorney that is not afraid to stand up and speak up for you, and at times even challenge you when you're stepping back into the patterns of the drama, and keep you committed to the boundaries you'd said you wanted to have, and make sure that they've created a plan that foresees how this high conflict personality can rear its head and come and test all those boundaries again. So you really need a strong parenting plan, and you really need an attorney that can pretty much foresee the future, because they've had so much experience with this type of personality.
And that's a really good point, because when you are searching for an attorney, a very important question to ask is, how many high conflict cases, how many situations where there's a narcissist or this high conflict personality involved, have you handled? Because a lot of attorneys don't have experience with that. And a lot of times the high conflict person is very charming.
And very manipulative
And
with that
very
charm.
manipulative.
Yeah. And they'll come into court and be the most liked person in the room.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why it's very important to have a skilled attorney who knows how to handle those situations.
Well, thanks, Jeanette. And thank you guys for watching.
Thank you.